Chosen one, aha, take a breath. Before you clicked, before you even realized you were searching, something ancient and intentional was already moving toward you. This moment was arranged, not by accident, not by algorithm, but by divine timing. You didn't find this message. This message found you. And if your heart feels exposed right now, if something inside you just went quiet, that's because heaven knows your name. You've been carrying questions you never spoke out loud, pain you learned to survive instead of explain. There were nights when the silence felt louder than the noise, when you wondered how you could feel so guided and yet so lost at the same time. You tried to stay strong, you tried to stay faithful, but deep down, you felt like something ended before it was finished. Like you were pushed out of a season you weren't ready to leave. Chosen one, hear this gently. What you called confusion was actually protection. There were battles around you that you couldn't see, conversations happening in the spirit while you were just trying to make it through the day. You thought you were being delayed, but heaven was investigating. You thought doors were closing because you failed, but they were closing because you outgrew what could no longer contain you. Light was being preserved in you, even while you walked through shadow. And chosen one, before we go deeper, pause for a moment, hit subscribe, and comment, "I received this," if your spirit is already responding. Not as a habit, not as a click, but as a declaration. Because alignment begins when you agree with what heaven is already saying over you. What you survived didn't break you, it marked you. The rejection, the isolation, the sudden endings, none of it was random. Heaven pulled you out quietly because staying any longer would have distorted your calling. You were never meant to blend in there. You were never meant to shrink to survive. That season had an expiration date, and even though it ended abruptly, it ended on purpose. Something forced you out before you felt ready, and that wasn't failure. That interruption was mercy. Heaven stepped in because staying any longer would have cost you your future. Stay with me, chosen one, because what you're about to hear will explain what was taken, why it had to end, and what is now being prepared for you. Behind the scenes in perfect timing. Chosen one, there is a moment that doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't announce itself with chaos or warning. It comes quietly, almost tenderly, when the place that once felt safe begins to feel small. Nothing is visibly wrong. Nothing is broken. And yet something within you starts to feel compressed, as if your spirit is pressing against invisible walls. Have you felt that subtle tightening? That sense that you are still standing in the same place, but you're no longer breathing freely there? At first you question yourself. You tell yourself to be grateful. You remind yourself how this space once sheltered you, how it once carried you through storms you didn't think you'd survive. And you're not wrong. This place did cover you. It did protect you. But chosen one, protection has a season. Covering is meant to prepare you, not confine you. And when God sees that what once guarded you is now restricting your growth, He begins to move, not in anger, but in love. This is where comfort quietly becomes a container, not because it's harmful, but because it's familiar. Familiar rhythms, familiar people, familiar patterns that no longer require faith. And without realizing it, your spirit stops reaching. Your prayers become smaller, your vision narrows, you're still functioning, still showing up, but you're no longer expanding. Can you sense the difference between peace and stagnation? Between rest and settling? God does not disrupt what is still serving your becoming. So if something started shifting, if restlessness crept in, if dissatisfaction rose without explanation, it wasn't rebellion, it was readiness. God disrupts when staying would cost you more than leaving. He shakes not to scare you, but to wake you. Because chosen one, heaven refuses to let you grow comfortable in a place that can no longer stretch your faith. And the shaking doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's a gentle unease you can't pray away. Sometimes it's doors that stop opening the way they used to. Sometimes it's joy fading from what once fulfilled you. Have you noticed how what used to excite you no longer feeds you? That's not ingratitude. That's transition. God loves you too much to let you suffocate in safety. When your spirit outgrows its environment, Heaven intervenes. And though it may feel unsettling at first, this is divine confirmation that there is more ahead. You are not being pushed out. You are being pulled forward. Stay with me, chosen one, because once comfort breaks, calling begins to speak. Chosen one, some burdens don't announce themselves as heavy. They don't arrive with pain or obvious resistance. They settle in quietly, disguised as loyalty, responsibility, or love. You carry them so naturally that you stop noticing the strain. But have you wondered why moving forward began to feel harder than it should? Why clarity started slipping, even though your intentions remain pure? Not every attachment looks harmful. Some feel necessary, some feel familiar, some feel like promises you made in earlier seasons when you didn't yet know how much you would grow. And so you held on, out of faithfulness, out of fear of disappointing others, out of a belief that endurance was the same as obedience. But chosen one, endurance is not always calling. Sometimes it's weight. This is how the unseen burden works. It doesn't crush you all at once. It slowly dulls your discernment. Your prayers become quieter, not because you've lost faith, but because you're exhausted from carrying what was never meant to come with you. Your vision becomes foggy, not because you lack purpose, but because something attached itself to your path that God never intended to travel that far with you. Can you sense how your spirit began compensating instead of flowing? God noticed long before you did. He saw the toll it was taking on your timing, your joy, your sensitivity to His voice. He saw how that attachment was negotiating your future in small, almost invisible ways. And in mercy, He stepped in, not to punish you, but to protect what was ahead. Chosen one, when God removes weight, it can feel like loss, but it is actually preservation. This is why the separation felt sudden. This is why it felt confusing. God didn't wait for the burden to become permanent. He didn't allow it to define your next assignment. Because some things, if carried too long, don't just slow you down, they reshape you. And heaven refused to let your identity be altered by a weight you were never called to bear. Ask yourself gently, what changed in you once that weight was gone? Did your breathing deepen? Did your thoughts clear? Did peace return in unexpected moments? That is your confirmation. You were not weak for feeling tired. You were strong for carrying it as long as you did. Chosen one, God removed the weight because your future requires agility, clarity, and freedom. What lies ahead cannot be accessed while burdened by what belongs to a previous season. And now that your hands are empty, heaven is preparing to place something new in them. Something light, aligned, and fully yours. Chosen one, there are moments when God moves you without a conversation, without a warning, without the closure you thought you needed. One day you're still trying to understand, still waiting for clarity, and the next, everything has shifted. No explanation, no final sentence. Just silence where answers were supposed to be. And you wonder, why would God leave me with unanswered questions? But hear this gently. He didn't leave you confused. He moved you because explanation would have delayed your obedience. God knows your heart. He knows how deeply you analyze, how sincerely you seek meaning. And sometimes if He explained everything, you would try to reason with what He already decided. You would negotiate with destiny. You would reopen doors He closed for your protection. That is why silence becomes a strategy. Not cruelty, covering. Have you noticed how every time you tried to get closure, your spirit felt pulled backward instead of forward? Sudden removals are not punishment. They are divine interruptions designed to keep you from returning to what your spirit has already outgrown. God steps in quickly when lingering would cost you clarity. When you're emotionally attached, logic can override discernment. And so God removes you before your mind can talk your soul into staying. Chosen one, what felt abrupt was actually precise. This is why the silence hurt. Because part of you wanted confirmation from people instead of assurance from heaven. You wanted reasons you could hold, explanations you could replay, but God wanted trust. He wanted you to walk by faith, not by understanding. And though it felt unsettling, that silence carried authority. Heaven does not argue with what it has already settled. Ask yourself this: if God had explained everything, would you have truly let go? Or would you have tried to fix, justify, or rescue what he was already releasing? Sometimes closure is not a conversation, it is movement. Sometimes the answer is not spoken, it is separation. Silence is not absence. Silence is God working beyond your reach, rearranging things you don't need to manage. While you were waiting for clarity, heaven was clearing paths. While you were replaying the ending, God was securing your next beginning. Chosen one, trust the quiet. Trust the unanswered questions. If God moved you without explaining himself, it's because what he's leading you into requires faith, not permission from the past. And what he closed without discussion, he closed with intention. Stay with me, because when God speaks again, it won't be to explain the past, but to reveal the future. Chosen one, let's speak honestly about the pain you felt when you left, or when you were forced to let go. It wasn't light, it wasn't imaginary. It cut deep, sudden, and personal. Separation always does. It feels like something was torn from you before you were ready to release it. And in those moments, you questioned whether obedience was worth the ache. But hear this with clarity and compassion. Leaving hurt, yes, but staying would have slowly emptied you of yourself. The pain of separation is sharp because it has an edge. It announces itself. You can name it, you can feel it, you can grieve it. But the cost of staying works differently. It is quiet, it erodes rather than wounds. It doesn't scream, it whispers. Day by day, it dulls your joy, thins your hope, and reshapes your identity without asking permission. Have you noticed how staying too long made you feel less like yourself, even though nothing dramatic was happening? God saw that future. He saw the slow compromise forming in the shadows. The way your boundaries were weakening, the way your passion was dimming, the way your spirit was adapting to survive instead of rising to live. And in mercy, he allowed the pain of leaving because he refused to permit the erosion of who you were becoming. Chosen one, God will always choose a wound that heals over a comfort that destroys. This is why the separation felt abrupt. This is why it felt unfair. Because God was choosing depth over delay, wholeness over familiarity. He would rather let you cry for a season than let you lose yourself for a lifetime. And even though you questioned him in the moment, his hand was steady. He knew what staying would cost you long after the pain of leaving faded. Ask yourself now, what was happening to your spirit before you left? Were you shrinking to keep peace? Were you silencing parts of yourself to remain accepted? Were you adjusting your calling to fit a space that no longer honored it? Those were warning signs, chosen one, and heaven responded before the damage became permanent. The ache you carry now is not evidence of a wrong decision. It is proof of a deep one. Pain often accompanies alignment. Growth almost always requires grief. But the wound God allows is never meant to weaken you. It is meant to release you. Chosen one, staying would have cost you clarity, identity, and future strength. Leaving cost you tears, but it saved your soul. And now as the pain begins to soften, something else is emerging in its place. Peace that doesn't require compromise, in a self that finally feels whole again. Stay with me, because the next step explains what unlocks when you finally stop looking back. Chosen one, there is a sacred shift that happens, not when everything makes sense, but when you finally stop going back. Not physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. The moment you stop reopening what God has already closed, something deep within you exhales, and you may not even notice it at first. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or announcements. It arrives as lightness, as relief, as a quiet return of peace you forgot you were allowed to feel. Have you sensed that subtle release, that moment when the weight began to lift? Breakthrough was never waiting for your perfection. God was never asking you to understand everything or to feel completely ready. He was waiting for your decision, the decision to trust what he removed, the decision to stop revisiting old conversations, old versions of yourself, old outcomes that no longer exist. Because every time you went back, even in thought, you reopened doors heaven had already sealed for your protection. Once you stopped returning, alignment began quietly arranging itself around you. Peace came first, but not the kind you were used to. This peace didn't require explanation or validation. It simply settled in. Clarity followed soon after, not because circumstances changed overnight, but because obedience sharpened your discernment. When you stopped resisting the ending, your vision cleared. Can you feel how your thoughts became calmer once you surrendered the need to go back? The door you thought was locked wasn't meant to reopen, it was meant to redirect you, and the path that replaced it didn't feel heavy. It didn't feel forced. It felt light because it was aligned. God does not lead through exhaustion, He leads through peace. And when you chose not to return, heaven responded immediately, even if you didn't see the full picture yet. Ask yourself this: what shifted the moment you stopped chasing closure? What changed when you stopped checking, wondering, replaying? That wasn't coincidence. That was confirmation. God honors movement. Even quiet obedience creates momentum in the spirit. Chosen one, returning delays what surrender unlocks. God cannot build your future while you are emotionally camping in the past. And the instant you released it, not with understanding, but with trust, doors you didn't knock on began opening. Paths you didn't force began forming. This is the reward of alignment. Not ease, but flow. Not answers, but assurance. And now that you've stopped going back, heaven can finally move you forward, freely, fully, and without resistance. Stay with me, chosen one, because what God is preparing next is not behind you. It's already unfolding ahead. Chosen one, while you were grieving what ended, heaven was quietly working on what begins. While your heart was processing loss, confusion, and unanswered questions, God was not paused. He was precise. Every tear you shed became part of the timing, not a delay. You thought you were standing still, but in the unseen, things were moving with intention. Have you noticed how endings often feel empty, not because nothing is coming, but because what's coming hasn't arrived yet? This next place God is preparing is not just new for the sake of change. It is fitting. It aligns with the version of you that emerged through pressure, prayer, and perseverance. You won't have to shrink to survive there. You won't have to explain your depth, your boundaries, or your calling. This place will recognize you before you introduce yourself. It will feel familiar in spirit, even though it's unfamiliar in form. Doesn't your soul long for a place where understanding is natural, not negotiated? What God is preparing will not drain you. It will not demand constant proving or endless endurance. It won't rush you into becoming something you're not. Instead, it will strengthen what's already within you. It will stretch you, yes, but without breaking you. Growth will feel purposeful, not punishing. For the first time, you'll move forward without feeling like you're leaving pieces of yourself behind. Chosen one, the reason the previous season had to end is because it could not support what God is about to build through you. The structure was too small, the environment too limiting, the vision too narrow. God never removes you without replacement. He removes you because the next space requires your full self. Have you felt that quiet anticipation lately? That sense that something is forming, even if you can't name it yet? This next place will call you higher, not through pressure, but through permission. You'll feel invited to rise rather than forced to perform. Your gifts will be seen, not exploited. Your presence will be valued, not tolerated. And in this space, you won't be rushed into healing. You'll be supported through it. While you were letting go, God was preparing alignment. While you were releasing, He was restoring. Nothing was wasted, nothing was mistimed. Every step away from the old was a step closer to the new. Chosen one, trust what is unfolding. The place God prepared is already reaching for you, just as you are reaching for it. And when you arrive, you'll realize this truth with clarity and peace. You were never supposed to stay there. That season was temporary, but what's coming now is built to last. Chosen one, let me take you deeper, because what God prepared while you were letting go is more intentional than you realize. This was not a last-minute adjustment. It was not heaven reacting to loss. It was design unfolding on schedule. Long before you felt the grief, God saw the gap that would be created, and He filled it with purpose. You felt absence because something familiar was gone, but heaven saw space, and space is where God builds. There are seasons where God asks you to release without revealing what replaces it, not because He is withholding, but because faith matures in the dark. If He showed you too soon, You might cling to the promise instead of trusting the process. So he lets you walk through the quiet. He allows the empty feeling. And all the while, he is shaping a place that can finally sustain the version of you that emerged through pain. Can you feel how you are no longer who you were when this journey began? This next place will meet you differently. You won't enter exhausted, fighting to prove your worth. You won't arrive explaining your history just to justify your presence. You'll be recognized, not because of what you survived, but because of what you carry. Your discernment, your depth, your restraint, your strength in silence. These were developed in the waiting, and now they are the very qualities that make you ready. God is preparing a space where your spirit can expand without resistance, where your voice doesn't need permission, where your boundaries are respected, not challenged. You will notice that conversations feel cleaner, that peace comes easier, that joy doesn't feel borrowed or temporary. This is how you'll know you are no longer fighting the environment to stay aligned. Chosen one, the reason the previous place drained you is because it required a version of you that no longer exists. You outgrew it quietly, and instead of celebrating your growth, that space demanded your old self. God would not allow that betrayal of your becoming, so he moved you, not because you failed, but because you succeeded. Have you noticed how you're no longer drawn to what once consumed you? How your tolerance for chaos has decreased? How your spirit now craves clarity, not noise? That's preparation. God doesn't just move you geographically or relationally, he moves you internally first. By the time the door opens, your spirit will already recognize it. This next place will not rush your healing. It will allow you to unfold at heaven's pace. You will grow, but without pressure. You will be stretched, but without fear. God is not leading you into survival. He is leading you into stewardship. Stewardship of your gifts. Stewardship of your peace. Stewardship of the calling that could not survive where you were. And listen carefully, chosen one. What's coming will not look like what you lost. If it did, you might confuse replacement with repetition. God does not repeat seasons, he redeems them. What he is building now carries wisdom from the past without repeating its pain. It holds familiarity in spirit, but not in limitation. While you were letting go, God was aligning people who will meet you with understanding instead of resistance. Assignments that fit instead of drain. Opportunities that don't require compromise. You will feel it when you step into it. Your shoulders will relax. Your breath will deepen. Your spirit will say, I don't have to perform here. Chosen one, this place is already prepared, but you must arrive unburdened. That is why the letting go was necessary. That is why the separation had to happen first. God cannot pour new wine into old containers, and he will not send you where you cannot remain whole. So trust the timing, trust the silence, trust the distance between what ended and what begins. You are not behind, you are not forgotten. You are being led, carefully, intentionally, into a space that can finally hold all of you. And when you arrive, you will understand with peace instead of pain. Heaven was never removing something from you. Heaven was making room.